I don't know where you are. I know I am in Orlando. Where are you speaking to me to?
Hello and welcome to episode 110 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over my 25-year career from techie to CMO, and each week on this podcast, I chat to the true rock stars, my fabulous guests and chums, and hopefully share with you some marketing street knowledge that will inspire the rockstar CMO in you. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday, April the 15th. I hope you're enjoying Easter weekend, if that's your thing, and that you are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week, Jeff Clark and I talk pyramids, and not in a Bernie Madoff way. I chat with agency founder and author Chris Smith, and we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word. We'll be right back after this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
If, like me, you geek out on content management, you might be curious about the latest state of the market, the systems marketers are using, and how companies are solving the complex challenges of connecting with consumers that expect our brands to be on the digital channel of their choosing, not ours. Well, our chums at Storyblock, a highly rated headless CMS vendor, now partner of the Marketing Podcast Network, have commissioned a study that talked to over 500 businesses across the US and Europe to answer those questions. The result is a report called The State of Content Management, and it shares how companies, maybe just like yours, are approaching content distribution through their digital channels in 2022. The results are fascinating, and through our partnership, you can grab a copy for yourself today. Just go to storyblock.com/rockstar for your free report. That's storyblock, without the C.com/rockstar. I will, of course, include that link in the show notes. Time for our first segment with my chum, Jeff Clark, a sought-after marketing strategy advisor and former SiriusDecisions Forrester Research Director. This week, Jeff brings another book to the Rockstar CMO penthouse as we dive into storytelling with pyramids. Welcome back, Jeff, to Rockstar CMO. How are you, my friend?
I am doing very well on a very nice spring day here in central Massachusetts.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, we've had we haven't had the nicest day, but we've got above average temperatures here, which is worrying because this might be our summer for all I know. So.
That's what I remember. You get summer in spring, and you get a little bit of summer at the end of summer and early fall, and then summer itself seems to be really protective.
Yes, well, it's never a dull day. Well, often a dull day. Just you know. All right, so let's get to agenda item number 2, which is the topic of the day, which is we're still messing about with these 5 effing marketing fundamentals that we've been chatting about for the last few weeks, and we're going to dip back to number 3, which is communication and storytelling, which we first covered in episode 105, for those of you who want to listen back. And like last week, you've brought a book to the show, Jeff.
I am.
We were eating the big fish last week, which was fun, and it was really nice to hear from the author on Twitter.
Yes, I thought I was very excited that he...
Especially as we had that long discussion about why the hell he called it Eating the Big Fish. So it was good to.
I don't think he answered my question that I posed back to him, but
well, he said it came from an Avis ad back in the day.
Oh.
Which showed because Avis were the challenger brand versus Hertz, and apparently they did an ad which featured a fish.
I didn't see that. Did he? Was that his responding on? I can't remember. If it was
no, he mentioned some of that. I think I've pulled together from my knowledge of my deep understanding and knowledge of advertising. But I think that's it. Somebody might phone in and suggest that I'm incorrect, but I think that's the case. But so you've brought a book to the show again this week.
Yes.
What say you, Jeff, on the topic of storytelling? And you've brought a book. What have you brought?
I have brought the book, The Pyramid Principle, which is, as a business book, this is definitely a guide to how to build, a talk track, a story, a presentation. Written, what all? I mean, I think it's very applicable to all different types of communication. But it was written by a woman named Barbara Minto, who came from McKinsey, and then she developed her own consulting group, just focused on helping people communicate. And she's got a long list of important people she's done personal consulting from. And the book that I have came from 2009. I believe it was a revision from earlier works, which I saw a number of different dates for. But so she is now still alive, but is now in her 80s. But has been obviously this was successful. She made a career out of it.
Yes, but when you say the pyramid principle, and I'm going to looking at the notes here. This isn't a case of pyramid selling or any of that.
No, it's very. I know. There's like the new age treatment of you lie under a principle. A pyramid, or there's the pyramid schemes, and no, this is nothing like that. It addresses the problem, which was coined from somebody else, called the magic number of 7. Right. And 7 means the magic number part of it is that people can't comprehend more than 7 ideas at a time. I think it's actually 7 plus or minus 2. So there's some people who can do 9. A lot of people can only do 5. And so it's hard to comprehend, and it's also, it doesn't stick in your short-term memory. Which
didn't we talk about that when we did the 7 or 8 P's of marketing, which then drove
I think I brought it up at that time. Because I always think about the fact that that's the problem with the 10 Commandments is that, it's like I can remember, don't kill anybody, don't steal. There's something about coveting something. I can't remember what or who that is. And so, that's,
which is
been bugging humankind ever since.
Well, yeah. And that's, we actually were having that. I often refer to conversations around the dinner table with my daughter who's studying sociology and psychology. And we were having a conversation about the commandments, the 10 Commandments, and what was considered sin and what was wrong and what was right. Could I remember all 10? Bugger, no, I could not. Yeah. I ran out of steam after thou shalt not kill, just like you did just now. Stealing, killing, I think that's about it.
Those are no-brainers.
And that's not a new phenomenon. I mean, these days we're always talking about how the modern consumer has got the brain of a goldfish, but this has been around for a while.
It is nothing. I mean, it's as a concept, it's nothing new, and what it is. I mean, in terms of trying to apply it to our task at hand, is that when you've got if you've got more than 7 things that you're trying to get across, you need to group them in something that makes sense, so that people can say, oh, okay, there's this main thesis or point you made, and there's some subpoints that sit in this group and some points that sit in that group. And the example that is used in the book at the beginning is the grocery shopping challenge. If a husband runs off or is about to leave the house and says, "Okay, I'm going to go get milk," and then the wife says, and it could be the roles could be reversed, but the wife says, "Oh, by the way, we need bread." And then she like opens up the cupboards and says, "Oh, and we need, we need some fruit. We need apples and oranges." And opens up the refrigerator, and we need butter. Blah, blah. And so, if all of a sudden it's just this list of things, the guy's going to go out of the house and go. He's going to remember some of them, but he's not going to remember everything that was given to him, unless he in his brain or as it was being communicated, saying, okay, we need 4 dairy products. Okay, we need milk, eggs, butter, sour cream. We need 3 types of fruit. We need blah blah blah, and kind of organizes it, for them. And it's and I listen to presentations, podcasts, I'm in meetings and stuff like that, and just people pour over stuff, and it's like you realize that it even though you're trying to pay attention, if you don't know the structure of how things are going to go together, you're gonna leave things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to use that analogy of the shopping list, but also I guess that all ladders up to one thing, which is shopping, right? Which is
yes,
kind of what we need to do.
You've got to go get stuff.
That's the thing to get it back to some marketing and our storytelling is we have a principal story we want to tell, and then we should group the things that we want to tell beneath that in some logical fashion.
Yeah, I mean, and it all starts. So the thing at the top is the thesis, or that's at least what she calls it, the thesis, and so that is. If you've got, and I think this applies to any type of communication. So like if you got a success story, ABC company saved so many dollars using our XYZ platform, or, there's an ad, you can buy your favorite book with the new Kindle app, or, you're sending emails and you're usually starting with a promise. And the thing is, it's like, okay, now once I've made that thesis, what's next? And in the case of like a success story, the typical grouping is, there was a challenge, there was a solution, there's a set of benefits for that solution, or if it's an ad, you made a promise, and then hopefully you mentioned what the fulfillment of the promise is, and what's the call to action, and as your documents get bigger, you have more things that you can group under the categories, but you can't go so far on a level that you're not you're trying to build things under each of those elements. So if I have my one thesis and I got 3 big points, then what are the big points that are under those points, and et cetera, as I work my way down.
And so I think one of the things that we do, and I was reviewing some copy. I've reviewed copy in the past, shall we say it like that? And I think particularly in B2B, it seems that we're really good at talking about the problem. We understand the problem, and as we're telling the story, we start with the theme, but then we start going back to and then there's the problem, and then there's the problem, and so you end up with that dysfunctional kind of storyline that's being told. So, is that the structure? Then you start with the theses. Is that how that's? If we're picturing a pyramid in our heads, is that what it's looking like?
You start with the thesis, so that's the top of the pyramid, and then you'd say, there's actually 4 rules that are part of this structure. So start with the thesis. Second is the idea is that every level must be summaries of whatever's above it.
Summaries. They're not pulling out more detail from the one above it. They're summaries.
Well, actually, so summaries may not be the best choice of word, but it is basically
they're summary ideas.
It's supporting what is above it. And that everything in each set. So if I've got 3 sets of things like my challenge, my solution, my benefit, then all of the content within there has got to be the same part of that same idea. So each set has to be analogous, and it has to support going on its way up. Right. And at any level, the things could be ordered in some sort of logical manner. So it's like if I have my my brand, which is I was thinking of an example of when I was at SDL, which is a company that you were at well, and it's like we were continually working on the message. And as we were focusing on, that we're a company that brings your brand to the world, because it was the combination of content management and the ability to do language translations. So it's like, that's the statement. So under that, there's, we make going global easy, because of our translation capabilities. We engage customers in the moment because of the ability to do personalization with our content platforms. And we establish, a lifetime of value in your communication with your customers. So those kind of become the supporting messages. And then under that, you can say, well, what supports each of those things?
Right.
Because now I've made new statements. And so the new statements, need their own support. And I can go down for the supporting messages, value drivers, differentiators, and basically, I'm as I'm building this out, I've got the thing we worked on was a messaging document that had 5 different layers that kind of broadened out from that top message of bringing your brand to the world.
Right. So just to bring it to life a little bit for the listeners, at the top is the master message. So this is like the 3 to 7 to 8 word summary that says, this is us, this is what we do. And then underneath that, in this particular example, there's 3 core messages that you've got. So it could be that you're a B2B brand and you are easy to use, secure, and I don't know, innovative or whatever. Let me pick the 3 most generic things, right? And then underneath that, you're saying supporting messages. So I've seen this where I've implemented this, and it's been more like proof points. So we're kind of getting into sort of like proving some of these statements. So we're secure. We're secure because of these features in our product. Is this at this point that you're saying at this 3rd level, or that this customer says this, or we had this experience? Is this where we're like proving what we meant by the core messages?
Yes, and so the second tier is proving why you made the thesis at the top.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And then the 3rd level is proving why, if we say we make global easy, well, it's like, okay, that's an interesting statement. So why do you say that? And then and then you can get into in each level, you've got to ask the question of kind of like, well, so what? So one of the things that in the book they talk about as you build the pyramid and you're looking at each level is, so what are we discussing? Yeah. What question are you answering for the audience? Because the audience is going to say, they bring their brand to the world. Oh, well, that's kind of nice. Well, so
what does it mean?
What's it mean to the person you're intending to be talking to? Yeah. And then what's the answer? And the answer should kind of work is if you think through the situation, the complications, and the answer you're giving, you need to kind of prove that answer that you're giving actually supports the level above it. Yeah. And then it's like, well, what's that? You as you're kind of workshopping this is it. Well, what's the next question that they're going to ask? Once I've said that, and they say, okay, I get that, but then I'm going to ask another question, and you keep building the pyramid.
That you could describe those layers as different depending on your business, but predominantly that top layer is going to be that master message. I don't know what it's called in the book, and then you've got these. I mean, most I've done this, and I usually call it a messaging matrix and not pyramid shaped. So I have a message that sits across the whole thing. Then I have like 4 or 5 core messages that sit under that, and then underneath those are the things that are going to support that, the proof points. And the value drivers, and where in this, where particularly in B2B, where do things like the features and functions and all that kind of stuff fit in? Are we then driving down from the main idea is then connected right down to what the product actually does? Is that where this gets to?
Yes, and I would say again, if you're building out a brand messaging matrix, absolutely, you got to get down to, well, what are the physical things that we're selling or services we're providing that actually execute on the value drivers as you work your way up the pyramid. But again, if you're, I also want to just make sure people understand this can apply to absolutely any type of communication. So the simpler the communication, like an advertisement, is going to be very simple. We make a promise, our product fulfills the promise, or our service
Right.
fulfills the promise. Here's the action I want you to take to go to the next thing. And
Right.
and as you're just thinking about how that ad is constructed, you want to make
Mhm.
sure, one, that it's not trying to violate these principles. I'm not
Yeah.
going to put in 7 features,
Yeah.
that are right under the headline. And no, I'm just going to list 7 features and think that people go,
Right.
oh, that's for me.
Right.
Plus, when you're doing things that fit into a brand messaging hierarchy and framework,
Yeah.
then they've got to be, built on one of the levels or one of the pillars of this pyramid that you're building for the company's messaging hierarchy.
Yeah, right. So, okay, so I think so from my perspective then, and the example that you brought with SDL was at a very high level, but you're saying the pyramid principle, basically, you just apply that to any of the communications that you're doing. So
Yep.
even if you're writing an email and you're
Yeah.
doing you're doing a promotional email, you've got to think about this, that at the top of the email is the stated high level message, and then you structure it in that similar way where you're diving into the detail. Is that so that you're grabbing attention of somebody right at the beginning, and then they get more interested?
Yeah, it's so that you're continuing to communicate, because remember, it's at each of the levels you're
Yeah.
trying to ask yourself what the questions
Right.
the audience is going to have. And I always remember being in discussions about messaging products or whatever, and people
Yeah.
would say, "But so what?
Yeah.
So what?" And it's like, well, sometimes that gets irritating. But on the other hand, you really you need to be able to answer, so what? And another area that I certainly use, things like this is for, thinking about presentations. So if somebody's going to present at a conference,
Yeah.
at a breakout or even in a keynote or something like that, you typically start with something that just grabs attention, helps you
Yeah.
identify with the audience, and then you've got to think about the structure of your presentation the exact same way, because our rule of thumb is people are going to remember 3 things. Some big executive from a big bank at a conference is going to deliver a 30-minute presentation, and there could be all kinds of good stuff in there and chuckles and whatever, but people are going to remember 3 things.
Yeah.
So what are those 3 things, and how are you grouping them, and how are you making those 3 things themselves credible and memorable, because you did provide enough information to support those?
Yeah. No, I see. So it's a thing that you can apply to any communication, high or low, whether you're writing an email, doing a presentation, or whether you're actually defining the messaging strategy for your whole organization. So there's that. Okay. So that's that is the pyramid principle. And you're quoting from a book Barbara Minto from 2009. So I shall include a link to that in the show notes. And if anybody's familiar with the pyramid principle, then please let us know. And
I would have to. I'll add that the book goes into considerable depth on this and constructing and using it as a guide for writing, and so highly recommend it as something to get. It's certainly out there at any bookstore, online, or storefront near you.
Splendid. And it sounds like something to test the time, because normally with a marketing book in 2009 you'd be like, whatever, but this is actually a it says the bloke with 20-year-old bloody actually more than that, permission marketing. When was that? I've got so many old books behind me.
To go back to what we were discussing at the beginning, is that the guy that put together the 10 Commandments, the big guy, he needed to read this book first.
Splendid. Yeah, group the coveting together, and then we might be able to remember.
That's right.
There's 3 main commandments: killing, stealing, and coveting, and then we'll go into some more detail.
The one under those, right?
Listen to the rest of the presentation. All right. Well, I think that is the pyramid done, kinda. And what shall we cover next week, you think, Jeff?
I think we are going to we're going to continue on our 5 effing marketing principles or fundamentals, and so we've got 2 more to dig deeper into. It's either marketing ops or marketing research, and I think we'll just have to let the listeners tune in next week to find out.
Absolutely. Well, I think I know where we're going to go, because I think that we're going to have our friend Simon on the show soon. So He's definitely the marketing ops dude. Anyway, so the last item on our agenda is, what are we going to listen to? What shall I play out on?
Well, it was interesting that with the concept of a pyramid, there were actually a lot of songs out there pick the theme up. I mean, I guess being Egyptian is doing what the Egyptians do is popular, or has always been popular. And so I don't know. I hate to go back to the 80s again, but Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles just seemed to be an obvious choice.
I cannot let the topic of pyramids go without playing Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles,
right. And then,
from 1987.
And as they say in the chorus, all the kids in the marketplace say, Walk Like an Egyptian.
Splendid. Well, there we go. Well, I'll play out with that. Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles from 1987. And we've already discussed, I will see you back here next week, and we will probably be talking about research, but we'll see how we get on this week. All right, mate. Well, I'll see you then. Have a great week.
Cheers, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
All the old paintings on the tomb, they do the stand dance, don't you know? If they move too quick, they're falling down like a domino. All the buzz on men by the Nile, they got the money on a bet. Gold crocodiles, they snap their teeth on your cigarette. Foreign types at the hookah pipe say, walk like an Egyptian.
Thank you, Jeff. Sticking with the 80s again there this week with an irresistible pick if you're going to talk about pyramids, and Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles from 1987. If any of you have any thoughts on the topics we discussed, please get in touch. We are Rockstar CMO just about everywhere. I'll include a link to an article that describes the pyramid principle in the show notes. Right. On to this week's guest. Chris Smith is the co-founder of Curaytor, a US real estate marketing solution that helps listing agents attract more listings. As you'll hear, he's also the author of The Conversion Code, a fabulous book that is taught at colleges like Johns Hopkins University, the second edition of which is out shortly. Unlike some theoretical marketers, Chris has drunk his own champagne and used the blueprint he shares in his book to quickly grow his own company to 8 figures in annual recurring revenue without raising any venture capital. His work has been featured in Adweek, Forbes, Fortune, and many other publications, and he has been a guest lecturer at NYU. And this week, he joined us on Rockstar CMO. A really nice fella. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I do. Welcome, Chris, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Ian.
Jolly good. And where am I speaking to you?
I don't know where you are. I know I am in Orlando. Where are you speaking to me to?
I am talking to you from just outside Oxford,
awesome.
So not too far away from London in the UK. And yourself?
Yes, I'm in Orlando, the home of Disney World. We have a lot of people from your neck of the woods that come over and get sunburnt while they're here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there a few times myself. And you've reminded me, as a podcast interviewer, I need to be a bit more precise with my questions. Thank you very much. So you run an agency called Curaytor, as I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, my partner Jimmy and I started the company 9 years ago. We made the Inc. list. We work with hundreds and hundreds of people. I would say if you talk about it as an agency, that is really the right way to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But it is definitely a modern agency where there has been a SaaS component, software platform, technology component from day one. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of a little bit of both. It's like, how do you scale an agency to 1,000 clients with 30 employees, which anybody listening would know is basically impossible. Well, you do it by building the tools you use to do the marketing for them. And to do that, we had to focus on one specific industry. We're not a jack of all trades, but we do really good work for those folks.
Yeah.
They pay significantly less than they would have in a traditional agency, but they pay significantly more than they would have if they just bought the tools.
Right. I think it's really interesting because a lot of marketing technology is born out of agencies in that view to scale. So you provide both the service and the tools at the same time.
Yeah, we say the
Yeah.
people, the plan, and the products. So it's
Yeah.
sort of this hybrid of consulting and executing and logging in.
Right.
And it's fun. You know, we're doing, like, I feel like I get jealous of regular software companies, Ian, because it's like they don't even have a phone number,
Yeah.
and we have to really hold people's hands because we're going
Yeah.
after a big
Yeah.
goal.
And your background yourself and the background of your agency, and I really like your specialism is real estate, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so what inspired you to make that change from being a realtor yourself?
Mhm.
That's the phrase you use in America, to becoming a marketer and founding the agency. What triggered
Well,
that?
you've just guessed wrong, Ian. So my path this is what's been so interesting. Like I said, technology from day one, because
Yeah.
I actually was a sales guy
Right.
for Quicken Loans,
Mm-hmm.
dialing for dollars, making good money, boiler room style environment for a multi-billion-dollar company. So I kind of saw it from the inside out.
Yeah.
Then I moved, and when I moved, I got recruited by a company called Top Producer
Mm-hmm.
that was run and owned by Realtor.com, which at the time was like the Zillow. Zillow wasn't even around yet, basically.
Yeah.
So they hired me because of my experience, being really good at sales for Quicken, which is sort of in the real estate industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was selling CRMs and websites and market report technology, and I was driving to different real estate offices, and I was doing little seminars in the office. And a lot of people already had the CRM. Top Producer was like Salesforce for real estate. It was the sort of Microsoft Explorer, Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
Doesn't end well, but in their day, they were the lion's share. So all the offices would let you in because everybody was struggling and needed help with trainings, and you'd go in and do a good training.
Yeah.
And then at the end, hey, these are the products you don't have. Let's walk through this. And so within the first appointment that I had, I realized, like, I was trying to get them to learn this software to help their business, but they were struggling with much more basic technology.
Right.
They didn't know how to use their phone, their laptop, social media, Gmail, YouTube, you name it. It was Greek to them. And, this is 08, 09, not the way it is now. And so I sort of just took a big step back and said, I got to teach them how to use the browser, not the software we sell that runs in the browser.
Yeah.
Or they're never going to keep it. They're going to churn. And we would lose our commission when people canceled. So I had a, vested interest in them using it, not just buying it. So my path to the real estate industry was that. And then every day at these appointments, the most rich agent, the richest realtor would, corner me at the end and say, here's a bunch of money. Like, how do I hire you? Like, dude, you're legit. You know your stuff.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it, because that was sort of a breach of contract. But it let me realize, wow, if I could just say yes, I bet I could.
Business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really like, and it sounds to me like, if I overlay it onto my sort of B2B background, that's like you were doing consultative selling from the very early days. Plus, I think a lot of us, when we're selling in B2B technology, you go into an organization, it's not the technology that's the problem. I mean, for you identified that it was using a browser that was the problem, that there are other fundamental things that need to change within the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone that sells B2B knows that adoption is the name of the game. Yeah. And people go through extreme lengths to try to ensure that adoption. And I did too. Like, I would actually say, hey, for your first 30 days, because the money back guarantee would end, I would say, I will just use it for you for the first 30 days. Like, I'm going to make sure this thing gets turned on and cranked up and it gets out the door. Because if I can get one of their customers to reply and say, ooh, this is cool, thank you, then I'm like, all right,
you're good.
Now they'll go use it.
Yeah.
That's how you get adoption, Ian. Right.
Yeah.
So that was sort of how I got into the game, and I love it. And so I sort of love sales and marketing, number one, and then 1B would be real estate, because that's just sort of where I landed.
Yeah, no, I like that. And is that what inspired you with the agency to understand that you couldn't just sell technology? You needed that service component? Because I think that's what a lot of people are missing right now.
Yes. So the average age of a real estate agent, at least at the time, was 57. It's always somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And so, they were what was called digital nomads. They were they were digital immigrants.
Yeah.
They were like trying to learn a new language in a new land, and it wasn't fun. Like I had this video I used to show where this guy it's a real office cam, and he's just beating the hell out of his keyboard. He starts beating his screen with the keyboard.
Yes.
And it's just so relatable. And so that was sort of me. So yes, from day one, because of my industry, number one, if a real estate agent's busy and successful, they don't have time to do it.
Right.
And then number two, if they do try to do it themselves, there's a lot of friction generationally. And so, I knew from day one, like, and I could show you the data from Curator historically who churns. There's a very, very much lower chance someone's going to churn if they have a service.
Yeah.
So if they check that box and upgrade and they add on what we call marketer, accelerator, the sort of service components, Google Ads, whatever it is, the churn rate is incredibly lower. The LTV is incredibly higher. So I think what happens in agencies, which is great, is they execute. Like the agency does the execution.
Yeah.
But there's not that ARR where every month and every year you're sort of auto renewing. It feels more like a project basis, at least from my perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, you struck on a magic balance there, because I think that a lot of B2B SaaS vendors are focusing entirely on being SaaS and as being, as you mentioned, not even having a telephone number, being as hands-off as possible, whereas they're serving an audience that need that help, but also will churn like that if they don't know you or if they don't feel any connection to you as an organization, right? If you're not helping them. So I think that's interesting. So you've talked about the challenges at the beginning. What are the primary marketing challenges you're seeing in real estate right now? I mean, it's not an industry I'm particularly familiar with. I'm not sure about our listeners, but what are those challenges you're seeing?
Well, I think the number one challenge, and people don't talk about it enough, is just that the percentage of human beings that need one this calendar year is very low. And so it's sort of like you're trying to, I don't know, you're not fishing in a barrel, you're fishing in an ocean.
Yeah.
And also there are some trends and patterns, of course, but it's just sort of like things like death, divorce, disease, things like obviously people moving out when their kids move out, empty nesters, like obviously anybody behind on their mortgage, that type of stuff. There are indicators that somebody might sell, but in a busy year is like 5 million homes that get bought and sold, and there's 330 million people in the US. So your message is irrelevant to almost everyone.
Right.
So there's no targeting that you can do that's sort of like, and trust me, companies try to sell that by the data, but the reality is that you sort of need to do content marketing to have a chance. And this is why I think real estate agents, at least traditionally, they have an email newsletter.
Yeah.
The contents of the email newsletter is kind of usually like, here's what's happening in the area. Here's things to do with your kids. Here's some of the community events, because they know to nurture for 7, 8, 9 years, you can't just keep sending them listings. And you know what they do instead? They send them nothing. They fall off. They don't keep in touch. And then the person that 8 years ago loved you doesn't even call you when it's time to sell again.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge in real estate.
What I like, and I'll get onto your book in a second, is what I like about what you're talking about there is it's a very understandable industry in terms of real estate. And then you're talking about content marketing and staying in touch with people and being relevant to them, but not selling to them, because you're only going to sell to them, like you say, every decade or so, right? or whatever. So,
think about this. You just made me think of something. If you create a video for a listing, there's 3 people typically that like it: you, the seller, and the buyer. Maybe right. So, meanwhile, what are you trying to get? 5,000 views for? So the point would be, how do you make that same video super interesting? To people that listing isn't something they want to buy. And there's really smart realtors doing that.
Mhm.
where they get it. They understand that like the listing is an asset for my marketing.
Yeah.
It's just stupid to pretend the buyer's the one listening to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully they are,
Yeah.
but I don't want all my friends on Facebook to hate me. So let me, and that's really where people kind of have cracked the code is
Yeah.
it's sort of content marketing about your category.
Yeah.
That's
I like
not
that.
annoying.
Yeah, and if it's anything like around here or my wife, then they'll look at the video just to see a neighbour's house on the inside.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've just realised I've got to get onto your book. So you've just shared all this experience in your book, The Conversion Code, which I read, and I think is an incredibly practical playbook for small business. And I think you've already come across as being that guy of working in marketing and sales and wanting to really help these people. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, I wrote the book 6 years ago, and what inspired me was a conference that I was doing for my customers. We had, hundreds and hundreds of people, and we just kind of did a survey and said, what do you want to learn while you're in Orlando? Help us create the agenda that's right for you. Yeah. And we had all these things they could vote on. It's probably like 30 categories. And the one that was sort of way above every other category was lead conversion.
Yeah.
And because at that point, and this is, 6-7 years ago, at that point, the name of the game was sort of how do you generate leads? Yeah. And nobody wanted to talk about the dirty little secret that most of them suck. They don't answer the phone. They hang up on you. They tell you to leave them alone. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I know how to do that. I used to get hung up on all the time at Quicken Loans. I used to get told to lose my information daily. That's sort of the job. So I realized like, oh, they don't know how to do the boiler room part. So I actually just wanted to write the book about that, Ian, just the sort of how do you close the lead once you get it. And my publisher, Wiley, great publisher, they give, really good insight because of their track record. They said, you're pretty naive if you think people know how to generate leads.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? You're right, because our clients know, but that's because we do it. They don't know how to do it. Yeah. So it became section 1, digital marketing. How do you attract high quality leads that are actually chasing you that you're not chasing? Yeah. And then follow up, and then the phone part. When they answer, what do you say? When they say this, what do you say next? The science of sales is what I love on the end of the transaction. So that's why I wrote it. It came from a conference topic, and I was like, okay, there's 6 months until the conference. Like, I got this. And I literally submitted to Wiley the night before the conference.
Wow.
Went on stage and presented the data from the book. And from there, it really blew up and did great.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast called the Marketing Book Podcast. And on there, the host, Douglas Burdett, always says that good books are written by people who stand up on stage and talk about this stuff. Because you've got to refine that message, right? So you refine that message and then you put it into the book.
Well, now that I went through the whole speaking circuit for several years on book number 1 and taught it and got the feedback, absolutely. Then you go, okay, now I know what's funny. Now I know what people will actually go back and do.
Right.
So that does help. But I would also argue with Douglas that it's that combined with someone that actually does the work too.
Oh, absolutely.
I do think sometimes when you're only a consultant, so it's sort of like half and half.
No, absolutely. It's always good to talk to people who are actually in the trenches. And I also think, like when I'm talking to marketers, sometimes marketers who work in very large organizations only see one part of marketing. They only see like their content marketers, or they do events or whatever it is. I think when you've got experience like yours and you've seen the whole thing, right? From how do I get the lead as a small business to how do I execute on that and how do I close? So that's what I really saw. And I didn't realize the book had been out so long. It was recommended to me and that I should speak to you.
Well, the reason we're on the phone now is the updated version, which is 2.0, which is sort of like, it's like 100 more pages. It's like, it's because 6 years in the technology and social media world is a lifetime. So I had to go back and basically research everything, quite frankly. And then I'm really proud of it. It's actually way better. I'm sure every author would say that. But when I was writing the first one, I was like absolutely slammed at Curator. Now we're 9 years old. I'm sort of out of that rocket ship phase. And now I have 50 people that do a great job of keeping the ship afloat. So now I'm actually doing the real work of writing a book, which I think will show when this one comes out.
Yeah, nice. And so so onto the book and it's so when's this new version out then?
Yeah, well, that depends on who you ask, but it's late April, early May. It comes out in a couple of weeks. If people are listening, today and in mid-April, but it's April 26th, of 2022, and then the other possible release date is May 3rd. That's a long story.
It's cool. Well, it's only a couple of weeks, and it would be good to hear that story, because I'm always interested in the author's journey and story. Right, when I talk to writers, because I think a lot of marketers have got a book in them that they want to write, and so talk to somebody who's actually been through that process. And the fact you did it so quickly before a conference, I think it's great as well. In that book, you talk about the 3 conversion code creeds for the audiences you talk to, because I quite like the fact that you've clearly delineated the audiences that are for this book. So what are those conversion creeds that you talked about?
Yeah, I think it's, because this is a textbook, it goes from left to right, and every chapter kind of moves down the path. Like you said, I actually doodled one time and I was like, what is everything? Like, do it all for me. And I kind of just doodled it. I was like, man, that is complex. And so the creeds are just really a way to say, what are the philosophies of good digital marketing? Yeah. So image is everything. Like the idea is that visuals is critical in the modern world, like video. And I'm not saying image is everything like your image. I'm saying that people process images this much faster than visual than words. Like we live in a Instagram first world. And so I obsess about design, and what that comes out as is image is everything. One of my favorite ones is social media is the internet. And that one changed because it was Facebook is the internet. Yeah. And in the 6 years with TikTok and Reels and with everything else that's really exploded, and with Facebook taking a hit, by the way, and becoming Meta. Yeah. But social media is the internet. So I think sometimes people differentiate where it's like internet marketing, digital marketing versus social media marketing. And the way that I try to get people to think about that is like, if you're not doing marketing on social media that's really good, you're not doing marketing on the internet that's really good, even if you think you do. God bless your little blog, like, you see what I'm saying? So I get it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we've always talked about, like previously, we talked about the fact that people are viewing the internet through their own particular keyhole like that, aren't they? To them, Facebook is the internet, like you're saying. If you don't think from that side, from their view, their perspective, then you're going to miss out. Yeah. And you have to have kind of been down that journey where AOL was, C: prompt was the internet. AOL was the internet. Google was the internet. Facebook was the internet. And now I think it's this sort of smorgasbord of social combined. But it's fun. Which sort of brings me to a point I want to make about the book, actually, is because you give advice about every channel, about, from somebody's website all the way to TikTok. So clearly I've got the updated version. Good. But the advice I'm always hearing about starting out with these kinds of initiatives is there's a temptation to be everywhere, but you really ought to focus on one and get that right first and expand. Do you agree with that when you talk to your clients? And where do you suggest that they actually start?
Yeah, I actually think they have to start almost a level before where should I post, which would be sort of, I think of it as what I call brand advertising or marketing, and just understanding that if you do all this cool brand stuff, I think of a brand play as TikTok. I think of a brand play as, a killer IG account, and when you do that, you can get really high quality leads, but you don't get a million of them versus like if I do a direct response ad and run a Facebook ad and drive. So you have to sort of say here's quality, here's quantity. They're directly correlated. So if you want more, they will be worse.
Yeah.
If you want better, there will be less.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you start there and then you say, okay, well, if I need more leads, then things like search and things like Facebook ads, and right? Like things like Google pay-per-click. If I need, call it volume of leads, I got to be there.
Yeah.
If I'm more quality and it's more of a brand play, and I'm, then I'm doing reels and I'm doing TikTok and I'm a YouTuber, I'm a podcaster, I'm going down that path. And the reality, Ian, is that a lot of people want both. And that is really probably the best place to be, is sort of dead in the middle of that line.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But also understanding, I love that, because I think that's appropriate in every organization, is understanding what you're using the channel for. Because I think a lot of people think that everything, they want to measure all their marketing based on leads, but there's certain things you're going to do. And if you choose to take those strategies, it's going to be about awareness. It's not going to be about leads. So I think that's really interesting when you talk about that balance.
Yeah, I make people that I consult for choose 5 KPIs and just say, what are the 5 we're going to look at? Because there's way too many that we could. And a lot of people, it's not number of leads.
Yeah.
They're actually more interested in follower growth, email subscribers, like video views. A lot of people check those boxes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Interesting. All right. I've just realized the time. This is fascinating. So I'm going to get to our final question. We have a regular feature on the Rockstar CMO called the Swimming Pool, which is our portal to hell for all the BS, snakehole, and overhyped trends that plague this industry we love. What would you throw into our Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool?
Yeah. So this one, I think the answer for me is, this is a tricky one, because a big part of the new book is about privacy and how marketers are ruining everything. And so now there's all these things in place where you can't track and you can't target and you can't pixel and you can't call, you can't mass text. It's very privacy is real. But I also think a lot of people overcorrected. So the thing I want to throw in the swimming pool is the cookie consent.
Right.
Because number one, as someone that loves design and loves user experience, it's the worst thing in the history of the internet.
Yeah.
And number two, it's irrelevant and not needed in 99% of the cases in the US. So let me make this big disclaimer.
Yeah.
If I don't want to have to show the consent message, all I have to agree to do is to not track people from European countries. I just hate that, like, literally thousands of websites have this message, but none of their business or any of their business ever is coming from Europe. Now, if I'm in Miami and I'm in New York and I'm selling real estate, then I need to make sure I'm compliant with that. But if I'm in Birmingham, I don't need to. I don't care if people in Poland aren't pixeled and tracked. So I think that is something people should consider throwing in the swimming pool if they're in the right scenario. Which, for me, I'm willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to not have those folks visit. At the sake of being able to track the folks that do. I just hate that pop-up, Ian.
No, I agree. I agree with that hating of the pop-up and the fact it's the first experience anybody has of your website, and the fact people blindly click through.
But why can't we just say the internet has cookies? Why do we have to do it at the micro level? Like, do it at the Chrome level.
And also the lack of nuance in this conversation. When I talk to my parents about cookies, they're like, the media has taught them that cookies are bad, and they're not all bad.
I know.
Trying to explain that, and my dad's like, well, I don't go on websites that have a cookie on them. So I think, well, he doesn't go on websites that are following GDPR. So he only goes on websites that are probably dropping cookies, just not telling him. Anyway. A fascinating conversation, Chris. I've really enjoyed it. When people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
Yeah, I think if they go to theconversioncode.com, that would be a great place to connect. That has all of my contact information, my social, the book, email, newsletter, all of the ways to get involved in the movement. For me, Ian, what I want people to take away from this big textbook is stop chasing leads.
Yep.
It's embarrassing. The consumer hates that you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know that it's not the way that you want to be doing it. And so like put that line in the sand
Yep.
and start attracting, get the leads chasing you. Like don't
Yeah.
figure out how to make the robo dial, the stealth voicemail. Like don't get better at that.
Yeah.
Get your phone ringing.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I also love the reference you made just now that marketers ruin everything, which is why we have this privacy movement. But I could talk to you for ages, Chris. This has really been great. And I look forward to staying in touch. I look forward, and I'll share all your links in the show notes, including to your book, which hopefully will be out in a couple of weeks. I look
Yes.
forward to that, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye. Thank you, Chris. I definitely recommend looking out for the second issue of his book, The Conversion Code. I was fortunate enough to have a preview edition ahead of this interview, and it's a super practical guide. Right. It's Friday evening, time to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and find my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend. Welcome to the end of the week and welcome to the bar. It should be it's a really noisy in here tonight. It just feels like, what? That's a classical orchestra I see over there. Are they playing Beethoven's Fifth? I think they are.
Yes, ACG.
It's very dramatic in here tonight.
You've let me off the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. Beethoven's Fifth is not something I would have expected to hear in the bar, but I
we're trying to
heard it here. It's Beethoven's Fifth.
We're trying to classy up the bar.
I see.
For you, Robert.
Class it up.
Specifically. Yes.
Well,
With a
here's
bit of Beethoven.
Yeah, you know, with Beethoven is exactly right. So I have a classy drink for us to celebrate the end of the week with. Now this is, again, we haven't had one of these in a while, but it's one of the more complex or difficult to find cocktails. And the reason is because of the main ingredient, which is elderflower. Which is really a lovely, lovely taste. And you can find it fresh. You can find it, as, there are many edible flowers. But mostly you can find an elderflower liqueur, which I'm sure you can find there in your favorite good liquor store, and a nice elderflower liqueur. And then what you do, now, this is in some cases you may see recipes calling for gin here, but I know you don't have any gin, so I have replaced that, and the way I make it is with a very nice, the lightest tequila that you can find. So if you can find a really light tequila and the elderflower liqueur, putting it together, and then you can spice it up. There, a lot of recipes will call for things like rosemary or thyme, or basically, whatever sort of herbs you really like. But I keep it pretty simple. I just keep it with, elderflower and the light tequila and sparkling water, which is always lovely to make this with, and then shake all that up into a wonderful elixir. Pour that over ice, and you have yourself a very nice very spring-like Easter celebration of a cocktail.
Well, yeah, we do have a lot of elderflower. In fact, I have an elder growing in the side of my garden. They grow like weeds here, really. So,
very nice.
We have a lot of elderflower and elderberries.
And the elderflower also, by the way, makes a lovely garnish for this drink as well. You just pop it in there.
What was that called, Robert?
Elderflower and herb cooler.
Ooh, and I heard you start with some ice, so I'm going to stick some ice in here.
Indeed.
Now, when I make my elderflower and tequila cooler. I stick with the more traditional gin, the lightest of tequilas.
I see.
The lightest and most English of tequilas. So this week it's not Bombay Sapphire, which is your favourite, or the Hendrix I usually have. It's back to the Sipsmiths, the London dry gin that of a present from my wife. It's very nice. So I'm just admiring the bottle, which is no point in doing that because we're not on video. But and then I'm going to stick into there. You know that here we consider the elderflower and the cucumber to be very similar. They're from the same country. So I'm going to put some Fever Tree cucumber tonic water in there.
Ooh.
And give this a taste. I think it's going to be very cooling and refreshing. Oh, just bash my microphone. Oh, I might put too much gin in that. That's delicious and very refreshing. I could drink one of these every week. And what are we calling this?
We are calling this the Elderflower and Herb Cooler. I don't put any herbs in it, but that's what it's called.
Oh, very nice. Maybe I should have considered some herbs in this. I haven't got any, but I could have considered it.
Yes, you could have considered it. Yes.
That's delicious.
The herb of cucumber made its way into it.
Yes. Cucumber replaces just about everything, doesn't it? Pineapples, mangoes, herbs. What else? So we're going to be drinking these wonderfully refreshing drinks. Where will we be drinking these?
Here's the thing this week. I think we're going somewhere different. And I am missing Boston. I haven't been to Boston in a long time, really since the pandemic. And so I miss Boston, especially in spring, because spring in Boston can be absolutely beautiful. I mean, the park in the center of the city and and walking along the river and it's just absolutely spectacular. And so I think we have to have this lovely spring cocktail on a beautiful spring day, warm but not too warm, in Boston, probably on the water somewhere, and sitting and enjoying the historical views of everything that Boston brings.
Splendid, yeah. I think you and I have spent some time in Boston, probably at the Gilbane.
We have indeed, yes.
Down on the
we used to spend every year in Boston. And I miss it. Quite frankly.
Yes, and I remember going there with my wife at exact this time of year at Easter, and they had 3 feet of snow the week before, and it was 80 degrees when we were there. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. That's the weird thing about the weather up there, isn't it? It can be like that. So that sounds lovely. So Boston, and we're probably reminiscing about times gone by where we used to do the Gilbane Content Conference. What would the conversation turn to once we finish with that?
Well, we're going to touch on something that I know that this is something that you're going to love, given your history. And, it's about managing up, which is an art and a science that I'm seeing in decline these days. And some of that has to do with the way that companies are being structured, especially in marketing departments, with how flat structures are becoming much more popular. And because of the, various feelings that have to be taken into account these days, in terms of making sure everybody's feeling safe and wonderful and all those kinds of things. But the idea of managing up is definitely something that every single manager that ever works in a larger company is going to have to deal with, which is how do you manage your boss, right? How do you manage up? How do you manage your supervisor? And the interesting thing is, as I started to look at it, because this came up the other day, I was speaking with a client about managing up and how they, dealt with their boss. I started looking it up about what managing up means today, and found that even companies like, Wall Street Journal or Harvard Business Review were writing really weird sort of descriptions about what managing is. Certainly from my perspective and the way I grew up in corporations, over the last 25 years, what I think of managing up. And so, Wall Street Journal, they defined managing up as making your boss's job easier. No, it's not. It really isn't. It really isn't. And then Harvard Business Review actually had a definition of managing up as being the most effective employee you can be, creating value for your boss and your company. And I go, who do you work for? Like, what the hell are you thinking? You know, have any of these people ever tried to manage up? I mean, you know, and it's like the theme for so many of these definitions these days seems to be that there's an assumption that, by the way, your boss is always right. And guess what? They're not. They're not always right. And so in a healthy relationship, I see managing up as about trust. It's about developing a deeper trust with your supervisor, and they have trust in you and you have trust in them. And if we go off of, you know, so Rachel Botsman, who is a wonderful, renowned expert on the concept of trust, has a definition of trust that I absolutely adore. And she says it's a confident relationship to the unknown. And so to me, that's what managing up is about, is helping leaders navigate uncertainty and developing trust as a result of that. And so that means, by the way, that when you believe they're wrong, you tell them that they're wrong. And so that's not even the biggest problem. And the reason that I was having this conversation with my colleague was because what they're doing is what I find so many people today doing, which is managing around. In other words, you have this idiosyncratic boss. And so what you end up doing is creating strategies and processes and projects to manage around those idiosyncrasies instead of actually dealing with the elephant in the room. And in many cases, in marketing and content, what this results in is sort of the process where they review everything. The boss reviews everything or has some input. And in this particular case, the conversation I was having with my colleague, they had a boss who would, you know, at the last minute upend, you know, projects, completely throw things off the rails because they would have comments or things for assets that were ready to get published and completely throw things in a crazy loop. And so the biggest problem, the actual biggest problem, and this is what this person had, isn't that the boss inserted themselves into the process or that they quite frankly had you know, they were managing around it. It was that they had created a process for creating content, not based on what they thought the best content would be, but what the boss would approve.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In other words, they created an entire content strategy based around what they thought would get approved so that they could meet their timelines rather than what was going to be the most compelling content for their audiences. And that's a problem.
Yeah. I've seen
so
that.
The question is, okay, how do you stop that? Well, one is, there's only two, by the way, ways to stop this or get around it. One is you got to acknowledge and accept it. And, you know, this is what I call the Steve Jobs model, right? Which is, all right, if the entire business knows that this is a problem and this is going to happen and that the boss is going to insert themselves and upend things and like Steve Jobs did famously, micromanaged everything, fine. But everybody accepts and acknowledges it and timelines are created accordingly, right? The second is, one of the things is to try to get a process in place where you pull forward visibility into everything and change the idea of when the boss is actually inserting themselves so that they insert themselves and have the ability to insert themselves at any time. And if they don't, then things move forward.
Yeah, no, I love that, and you know, I've had a very similar experience, and worked with an individual who was pretty into the detail of things, and there were some parts of the team that would try and avoid getting them any visibility of anything that's going on because they were worried about that kind, you know, because what would happen is that person was extremely stretched. But they wanted to see everything, so therefore it added weeks onto the production of any piece of content if they got involved. So people would try to work around them, as you were saying, and not include them in it, and hope that they could get something shipped before this person got to see anything. Or, like you say, I really like the idea there. You're talking about the Steve Jobs model, which is that, look, this is the way it works around here. And therefore, if I'm going to commit to a timeline of producing a piece of content, and this is part of the approval process, then it's going to take me 3 months.
That's right.
It is.
That's exactly right. And that's having the entire organization acknowledge it, right?
Exactly.
Which is, you know, and if everybody goes, okay, then that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's far better to get somebody like that involved earlier although it feels counterintuitive at the time, then to get them in, then them to insert themselves in later, because that'll be far more disruptive.
Well, the interesting thing is what I've found is that if you can provide either through technology or through a more visible process, and basically go to that manager, that executive leader, and say, you no longer have to wait to get your input into this process, right? You're going to have visibility into the entirety of the content process from ideation through its production.
Yeah.
And at any time, you can go into this tool or this spreadsheet or this, you can ask or whatever it is and have visibility into it.
Yeah.
And what I often find is that they have inserted themselves into the process not because they want to, but because they feel like they have to.
Yeah.
And once you give them the ability to look at everything and have visibility and input into everything from the earliest stages, now what you've done is two things. One is you've put the responsibility on them to say, I can do this earlier, so I should have.
Yeah.
In other words, if it gets to the point where it's already done and it's like, I haven't inputted on this yet, I probably missed my turn, right?
Yeah.
So because you've created that, look, you had the ability to do it earlier, you didn't.
Yep.
And so that's on you. And so it starts to track the behavior to say, to reinforce that, why are you actually doing this? Are you doing this because you care about the actual output? Well, then you should have done it earlier. If you're just doing it because you want to, you feel like you have some idiosyncratic need to see things when they're already, when they're ready to go live, well, then that's a personality issue that you need to fix.
Yeah.
But you're using the process in order to illuminate that rather than sort of saying to them, well, you should do this earlier.
Yeah.
And so you're not sticking them earlier into the process. You're just basically giving them access and visibility into the process earlier and putting it on them to actually do it.
Yeah. But, and even then though, it can be, well, yeah, sure. I didn't, but I'm going to mess it up anyway. Right. You see what I mean? Like they get involved later. And I think that's where I found that comment you made about the Steve Jobs organization. That's actually, you should be ready for that, right? It doesn't matter that you gave them visibility and that they ignored your emails and all that kind of stuff, and they came in late and then they messed everything up. That's just the way things are done around here. You need to factor that into your process.
But then it's tracked, right?
Yeah,
See, that's the thing is that you can start to say, okay, this is where the pattern is, right? Without a pattern, what you end up with is, is showing that, it's almost like you've got a car in your driveway, and it's always there for you to drive it, but you never fill it up full of gas until you run out of gas on the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Well, you had the car at any time you could have done that, and so yes, it does really suck for everybody that you didn't fill it up full of gas until the last minute, but that's kind of on you now because we now have the ability to show that and track it. Before, it was just, oh, woe is me. This is the last time I got into the car and I didn't notice that it was, empty of a tank. And so it's hard to pin that on somebody.
Yeah.
But when you've got the ability and you have the visibility into behavior, now all of a sudden you can say, hey, look, because what you're doing then is ostensibly throwing everything up into into disruption. And so now when I reset expectations and I say, oh, this thing is not going to be delivered, they have to go, you're right, because I inserted myself late in the process.
But you've got to be calm about it. I mean, good luck to you if you want to get frustrated with somebody more senior than you that are slowing down your project, right? That is not a great path to having a good time of things, right? Either in your own feeling about your job or in, how you're going to get on with this boss. It has to be calm, considered, and then reset your timeline and just crack on, right? You can't.
That's right. And so the idea here is that to identify whether you have a culture problem or a process problem.
Yeah.
And if you have a culture problem, that's not solvable by process.
No, absolutely. And you have to accept it. You have to accept it and take a breath or
leave.
Exactly.
Or leave.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I've seen so many people so frustrated with that kind of thing and being disrupted and helicopter bosses and all that kind of stuff. But you just have to accept. You have to plan for that, right? If you know that's the behavior, then you have to plan for that.
That's right. And it's not just you.
No.
The key here is that the entire business has to acknowledge it.
Yes. Yeah.
In other words, it's not good enough for marketing to acknowledge it, but sales not.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
In other words, if sales is always bitching that this thing is always late, why is it always late?
Yeah.
And your excuse is, well, because the CEO has to approve it and they don't do it in a very timely manner.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. It's still marketing's fault.
Yeah. Well, it's still late, right?
And-
Whereas if you said, this is going to take 3 months, I go, oh, how can this thing take 3 months? Well, this is the process.
right.
And look back. This is the history of delivery. We always take 3 months, so.
That's exactly
Or
right.
6.
And so the entire business has to acknowledge it and say, the reason that things take 3 months is because our Steve Jobsian boss it needs to insert himself or herself into the process.
Yeah.
And so everybody sort of nods their heads and goes, yeah, that's just the way things are.
Yeah. No, I love that. And what a great topic. And I'd also be interested in identifying oneself as being that boss as well. I wonder if you've had those sorts of conversations, but maybe that's a topic for another day and another cocktail.
You mean whether I'm that kind of boss?
No, because we're all leaders, and also we're all employees and employers. So and where we rate, and I wondered whether you've ever had the conversation with somebody that is that kind of boss that doesn't recognize that in themselves.
I've definitely had that conversation with my bosses. Yeah. In the past, absolutely, I've had that conversation with my bosses. Yeah, and by the way, the prevailing trend here is the first option, right? It's just basically personnel, especially in smaller and startup companies.
Yeah.
The prevailing trend is that your boss probably wants to wear multiple hats, and so getting involved in the decision making and inserting themselves last minute is much more prevalent than it is at larger organizations.
Yeah, no, it's a great thought, and I could fascinating. So if people want to read thoughts, I'm going to get this right this week, by you on the internet, where might they find these thoughts?
Well, we talk a lot about this on our website, which is, thank you for asking, contentadvisory.net.
And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't also promote our little podcast called This Old Marketing every now and again. And we talk a lot about this kind of stuff there, in addition to talking about media and marketing and, the news and what's going on. But then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter as well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a fan of your show. I think This Old Marketing is a perpetual link in the show notes. So if people want to find it, they can find it there. So splendid. Thank you very much, Robert. And once I've listened to your podcast and followed you on Twitter and LinkedIn, will you be in the bar?
I will be, and I'm just hopeful that the symphony will have continued. Yes.
Well, it's all for you, my friend, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers, buddy. Thank you, Robert. Time for us all to manage up. So that's a wrap on episode 110 of the Rockstar CMO Effing Marketing Podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Chris and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello to them, follow their work and check out all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know and help other people find us by dropping a rating or review in your favourite podcasting app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff and I will continue to explore the 5 effing marketing fundamentals. I chat to Joe Jansen, a marketing leader in the drinks industry, which is very appropriate for this show. And speaking of drink, Robert will be in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.